Hey everybody, Notorious here. Welcome back to my channel. In this episode, we're going to talk all about the sheet bend, as well as 3 of its variants, including the double sheet bend, the double dragon bend, and the double strand triple sheet bend. Not only will I teach you how to tie each of these knots, but we will analyze and discuss each one in depth. So let's get right to it. This is a sheet bend. A bend, by definition, is any knot that is used to securely connect 2 ropes together. The sheet bend is an essential knot. In other words, it is largely considered to be one of the most important knots that any person can learn. In fact, it is so important that Clifford Ashley himself decided to list it first in his book, The Ashley Book of Knots. The sheet bend is a very simple knot. It is not only easy to tie, but it is easy to memorize, and it offers relatively good strength and security. Interestingly, the sheet bend is structurally similar to the bowline. The sheet bend can be tied with either 2 ropes of identical diameters or with ropes of differing diameters. The sheet bend is actually an ideal choice for when you need to connect a smaller rope to a larger rope. The sheet bend is at its strongest when it is being loaded. However, when unloaded, it runs the risk of coming loose or coming undone. For example, if we simulate cyclic loading, you can see how the sheet bend will easily come undone. For this reason, the sheet bend should never be used for any critical rigging, and it should never be used for life support applications. Let me teach you how to tie a sheet bend. Tying a sheet bend is quick, simple, and easy. First, begin by forming a bight with one of your ropes. If you are connecting 2 ropes of identical diameters, then you can form this step with either rope. However, if, like in this demonstration, you are connecting a smaller rope to a larger rope, then you need to form the bight always with the larger rope. Next, take your second rope and bring it up through the bight. At this point, we want to be very careful. This is the part where many people don't pay attention. You have to look and see which side the tail of the bight is on. In this demonstration, it is facing up. That means we're going to wrap our rope around the right side of the bight. So we're going to take our rope and wrap it around that right side, and then we're going to take our working end on our second rope, and we're going to put it between the bight and itself, like this. It should look like this. Finally, let's dress and set the knot. Simply grab the bight firmly like this and the second rope and pull. You can further dress and set by pulling the tails individually to help lock everything in. Now you have a finished sheet bend. Once again, a correctly tied sheet bend should have both tails of each rope on the same side. A sheet bend that is tied where the rope being connected has the tail coming out on the opposite side is called a left-handed sheet bend. And it is well established that a left-handed sheet bend is not as secure as a properly tied sheet bend. So make sure you have those tails on the same side. Let's take a look at our first variant of the sheet bend, the double sheet bend. This is a double sheet bend. The double sheet bend is simple and easy to tie, just like the sheet bend, and it differs in only one way. The rope connected to the bight makes 2 turns around the bite instead of just 1. While this may seem like a small change, it actually offers huge benefits. This additional wrap around the bite makes the double sheet bend a much more ideal choice than the regular sheet bend. In fact, any chance where you can use a double sheet bend over a regular sheet bend, I would suggest that you do so. Just like the sheet bend, the double sheet bend is its strongest while under tension. And just like the sheet bend, when it is not under tension, it runs the risk of potentially loosening or even failing. If we do our simulated cyclic loading test again, we can see that the double sheet bend is still prone to coming apart and loosening up and potentially failing and coming undone. So, for this reason, just like with the sheet bend, the double sheet bend is not suitable for life support applications, and it is not recommended for critical rigging or hauling applications. If you do need to connect 2 ropes together for life support applications or for critical rigging and hauling, I would suggest that you take a look at the double fisherman bend, the triple fisherman bend, the Zeppelin bend, or the hunter's bend. All of those are significantly more secure and can be relied upon to hold their structural integrity even when cyclically loaded. So let's learn how to tie a double sheet bend. To tie a double sheet bend, begin just like you would with a regular sheet bend by forming a bight with one of the ropes. Just like with the sheet bend, if you're connecting 2 ropes of identical diameter, then you can form the bight with either rope. However, if connecting 2 ropes of different diameters, then the bight needs to be formed with the larger rope. Next, we're going to start by tying a sheet bend. And so, once again, we're going to take our second rope and bring it up through the bight. And once again, we're going to pay attention to which side the tail of our bight is on. So it's, again, at the top. So we're going to bring our second rope up and around, and then finish by bringing the working end of our second rope between itself and the bight. Now we have tied a sheet bend. To make this a double sheet bend, it's very simple. Take the working end of the rope connected to the bight and make a second turn around the bight, passing the working end once again between itself and the bight. Now it should look like this. At this point, we can dress and set again by grabbing the bight and the other rope and pulling, and then pulling each individual strand until we have a secure bend. Now we have a completed double sheet bend. Just like with the sheet bend, a correctly tied double sheet bend will have the tails of both ropes on the same side. Let's take a look at our next variant, the double dragon bend. This is a double dragon bend. The double dragon bend is essentially a variation of the double sheet bend. The only difference between the double sheet bend and the double dragon bend is that after completing the tying steps for a double sheet bend, you finish the knot by taking the tail of the bight and tucking it through itself. This adds quite a bit of security to this knot and makes it more secure than the sheet bend and even more secure than the double sheet bend. Unlike the sheet bend and double sheet bend, the double dragon bend is actually quite secure. In fact, after it has been tensioned, it can be relied upon to maintain its structural integrity quite well. If we do our simulated cyclic loading test again, you can see that the double dragon bend is not falling apart the same way that the sheet bend or double sheet bend were. One downside of the double dragon bend is that if it is loaded hard enough, it could jam pretty badly and turn into a knife knot. In fact, it is a good choice for anyone who wants to permanently connect two ropes together. Because of this, the double dragon could be considered safe for life support and critical rigging applications. However, again, it is definitely not an ideal choice in my opinion. I would still suggest the double fisherman bend and the Zeppelin bend and the hunter's bend over the double dragon bend. How about I show you how to tie the double dragon bend? When tying the double dragon bend, begin by forming a bight, just like the previous two variants. And just like the previous two variants, if you are tying two ropes of identical diameters, then you can form this bight with either rope. However, if you are connecting two ropes of differing diameters, then you want to form the bight with the larger rope. And next step is to simply tie a sheet bend, turn that sheet bend into a double sheet bend, and then we'll do our final step to turn it into a double dragon bend. So let's tie a sheet bend by going up through the bight and around the side where the tail of our bight is, and then take the working end of the other rope and bring it between itself and the bight. Great. So now we have a sheet bend. Let's turn this sheet bend into a double sheet bend by taking the working end of our other rope, passing it around the bight for a second time between the bight and itself. And now we have a double sheet bend. Let's lightly dress and set this knot. And to turn a double sheet bend into a double dragon bend, we're going to simply take the tail of our bight and pass it through itself. So we're going to pass it through the opening of the bight and make sure it is parallel with the standing end of our other rope that we're connecting it to. And now we can finish dressing and setting by pulling everything individually. And there you have it. You now have a double dragon bend. Let's take a look at our final variant, the Double Strand Triple Sheet Bend. This is a double strand triple sheet bend, and it is probably the most obscure version of the sheet bend out there. Not many people are even aware that it exists or that you can connect two ropes using a sheet bend like this. Let's take a look at it. The only difference between this knot and the sheet bend and the double sheet bend is that we are using the sheet bend technique to connect two ropes to a single rope versus one rope to another rope. So we're connecting three ropes together versus just two ropes together. This method can be used to connect either three ropes of equal diameter or three ropes of differing diameter. So it's definitely much more secure when you use it to connect two smaller ropes to one larger rope. However, you can certainly use it to connect 3 ropes of identical diameter. This knot is not that much more secure than the double sheet bend, although because we make 3 wraps or 3 turns around the bight with 2 ropes versus with the double sheet bend where we're making only 2 turns or 2 wraps around the bight with 1 rope, there is a bit more security. However, if we do our simulated cyclic loading test again, you can see that it is somewhat more secure, and that because there is so much bulk and so much tension around this bight, it does hold much better than a double sheet bend. So this is definitely more secure. I am not comfortable recommending that anyone use this bend for life support applications, nor would I suggest that anyone use it for critical rigging applications. However, if you are doing maybe non-critical rigging or light rigging and hauling, and if you're using it for utility purposes, where you basically just need to connect one rope to 2 other ropes in a secure fashion, then this is a very excellent choice. How about I teach you how to tie the double strand triple sheet bend? To tie the double strand triple sheet bend, you begin just like every other variant with a bight. And just like every other variant, if you're connecting 2 smaller ropes to a larger rope, then you want to form the bight with the larger rope. If you're connecting 3 ropes of identical diameter, then pick whichever rope is ideal for whatever application you're using it for and form the bight with it. Next, we're going to take our other 2 ropes and we want to pass them up through the bight. And just like every other variant, we want to pay attention to what side the tail of our bight is on so we know which direction to wrap around. And we're going to take our 2 strands and wrap around the tail side of our bight and make sure we have some extra slack. And we're basically starting out by tying a sheet bend, but with 2 ropes instead of 1. And here we go. We've got our sheet bend, a double strand sheet bend. And just so you know, if you ever need just a quick connection between 2 ropes and 1 other rope, you can tie it just like this. You can just tie a regular double strand sheet bend, and this will also hold quite well, but it's just not as secure as the triple variant. And next, we're just going to take the working ends and basically form a double strand double sheet bend. So here we have that. And we want to make sure that we're careful to keep all of the strands nicely and neatly aligned. We don't want anything to cross over because that would weaken the bend. And finally, to finish this bend, we make 1 last wrap around the bight, pass those working ends between themselves and the bight, and it will look like this. Now all we have to do is dress and set, And this is a little more time consuming than with a single strand variant, but if you take your time with it, you will end up with a nice and secure bend. So there we have it. This is a finished and properly dressed and set double strand triple sheet bend. All right, this concludes my episode on the sheet bend and 3 of its most interesting and most useful variants: the double sheet bend, the double dragon bend, and the double strand triple sheet bend. I hope you've learned something, and if you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button to show your support. Also, if you want to see more content like this, please hit subscribe and make sure you hit the notification bell so that way you'll be notified as soon as a new video drops. Additionally, if you're able to, please consider donating. I'm trying to save up for a dynamometer, which is a force measurement device, so that I can do interesting and unique videos involving force measurement and maybe even some brake testing. And as always, be sure to check out my channel for more hitch how-tos, knot tutorials, and climbing videos. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next episode.